He fired the woman he loved, because loving her meant destroying her. The glass paperweight hit the mahogany desk with a sharp crack that made Clara Evans flinch. Ethan Blake stood behind his desk, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him like a crown of cold diamonds. His jaw was tight, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them in 3 years of working by his side. "You're done here, Clara." His voice was low, controlled, but there was something beneath it that made her chest constrict. "Pack your things. I want you gone by the end of the day." Clara's hands trembled as she clutched the leather portfolio she'd been holding. The quarterly reports inside suddenly felt meaningless. Her mind raced, searching for what she'd done wrong, but came up empty. Yesterday, he'd praised her work on the merger. This morning, he'd smiled at her coffee order, the small gesture that always made her heart skip. Now he wouldn't even look at her. "Ethan, I don't understand." "Mr. Blake." His correction was sharp as a blade. "And there's nothing to understand. This is my decision. HR will handle your severance." The city beyond the windows blurred as tears pricked Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here. Not in the office where she'd given everything for 3 years. Where she'd stayed late countless nights, defending him to the board when the scandal broke, organizing his entire life while her own fell to pieces. "Very well, Mr. Blake." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'll have everything ready within the hour." She turned toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor with a finality that echoed through the vast office. Behind her, she heard the softest sound, something between a breath and a word, but she didn't turn back. The Clara who would have turned back, who would have fought for answers, had just died in that cold exchange. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. What Clara didn't see was Ethan's hand gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. She didn't see him sink into his leather chair, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with the weight of what he'd just done. And she certainly didn't hear him whisper into the empty office, "Forgive me." The next hour passed in a fog. Clara moved through the sleek corridors of Blake Industries like a ghost, aware of the stares from colleagues who'd heard the news. Word traveled fast in this building. The CEO's most trusted assistant. Fired. The distinction mattered, apparently, judging by the mixture of pity and curiosity in their eyes. Jessica from accounting caught her arm near the elevator. "Clara, what happened? Everyone's talking about." "Please." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Not now." She made it to her desk, the small workspace just outside Ethan's office where she'd spent more hours than in her own apartment. The desk was immaculate, as always. Everything in its place. The blue coffee mug he'd given her last Christmas sat beside her monitor. A framed photo of the company's anniversary gala showed the executive team, Ethan in the center, and if you looked closely, Clara in the background, watching him with an expression that now made her feel foolish. She packed methodically. Files, personal items, the expensive fountain pen Ethan had given her after she'd successfully negotiated the Anderson deal. Each item felt like a small death. When she reached for the coffee mug, her hand froze. Leave it. Let him see it every day and remember what he threw away. Marcus Chun, Ethan's CFO and closest thing to a friend, appeared at her desk. His usual jovial expression was replaced with concern. "Clara, I just heard. This doesn't make any sense. Let me talk to him." "Don't." Clara straightened, forcing herself to meet his eyes. He made his decision. "I'm not going to beg for a job where I'm not wanted." "But you are wanted. Everyone here knows you're the reason this place runs smoothly. Hell, you're the only one who can handle Ethan when he's in one of his moods." Marcus lowered his voice. "Something's wrong. This isn't like him." Clara almost laughed. Wasn't like him? The man who'd fired 3 executives in one morning without blinking? The man whose reputation for ruthlessness had earned him the nickname, the Ice King in business journals? Maybe she'd been naive to think she was different, that their professional relationship had meant something more than the others. "Maybe I never knew him at all," she said quietly, closing the box with her belongings. Security escorted her out, a humiliation she hadn't anticipated. As if she were a criminal instead of someone who'd given 3 years of her life to this company. The lobby stretched before her, all gleaming marble and modern art, and she walked through it with her head high, even as her heart shattered with each step. The September air hit her face as she pushed through the revolving doors. The city rushed past, indifferent to her pain. Taxis honked, people hurried along sidewalks, The world continued spinning, as if hers hadn't just stopped. Clara stood on the sidewalk, clutching her box of belongings, and finally let the tears fall. She didn't see Ethan watching from his office window 43 floors above, his hand pressed against the glass as if he could reach through it and undo everything. She didn't see him turn away, jaw clenched, and pour himself a drink even though it was barely noon. And she didn't hear him say to the empty room, "It's better this way. She deserves better than what I can give her." If you're feeling the emotion of this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Clara's apartment was a studio in Brooklyn, modest and warm, everything Ethan's penthouse wasn't. She dropped the box by the door and collapsed on her couch, still wearing her work clothes, and finally allowed herself to completely fall apart. The sobs came in waves, each one carrying 3 years of suppressed feelings, professional boundaries carefully maintained, and the devastating realization that she'd been more invested than she should have been. Her phone buzzed. Text after text from colleagues, but she ignored them all. What could she say? That she didn't know why she'd been fired? That the man she'd secretly loved for 3 years had dismissed her without explanation? That she felt like a fool for thinking their late-night strategy sessions had meant something beyond work? The evening light faded through her window, painting the walls in shades of orange and purple. Clara didn't move. She replayed every interaction from the past week, searching for clues. The merger with Hartley Corp had gone smoothly. The PR crisis had been averted. She'd even managed to get him to that charity gala he'd been dreading, and he'd seemed almost happy that night, laughing at something she'd said about the pretentious art on display. That was Thursday. 3 days ago. He'd loosened his tie, a rare gesture, and told her, "Clara, I don't know what I'd do without you." She'd smiled, hiding the way those words had made her heart race, and replied professionally, "That's why you pay me, Mr. Blake." Had she done something wrong that night? Said something inappropriate? She'd thought they were finally comfortable enough for friendly banter. Maybe she'd crossed a line she hadn't seen. Had she done something wrong that night? Said something inappropriate? She'd thought they were finally comfortable enough for friendly banter. Maybe she'd crossed a line she hadn't seen. Her sister Marie called, and this time Clara answered. "He fired me." "What? Ethan fired you? But you're his right hand." "Apparently not." Clara's voice was hollow. "He just ended it. No explanation, no warning. Just done." Marie was silent for a moment. "Clara, honey, everyone in your office knows how you feel about him." "I never." "You didn't have to. It's in every story you tell about work, every time you mention his name. Do you think maybe he knew, and this is his way of..." "Of what? Rejecting me?" Clara laughed bitterly. "He didn't need to fire me for that. I never said anything. I never crossed that line. Maybe that's the problem." Clara ended the call, too raw to hear more. She changed into sweats, washed her face, and stared at her reflection. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy, but beneath the tears was something else. Anger. She'd given Ethan Blake 3 years of her life, and he'd thrown her away like she meant nothing. She'd defended him when the board wanted him out after that whistleblower scandal. She'd organized his entire life, remembered his mother's birthday when he forgot, made sure he ate when he worked through lunch. And this was her reward. The anger felt better than the sadness. It gave her something to hold on to. 7 blocks away in his glass penthouse, Ethan stood in front of the same skyline Clara had seen behind him in his office. The city looked different from here, softer, the lights like stars fallen to earth. He held a tumbler of whiskey he hadn't touched, his reflection ghostly in the window. His phone sat on the counter, Marcus's 5th call of the evening going to voicemail. Ethan knew what his CFO wanted to say. That he'd made a mistake. That Clara was irreplaceable. That the office would fall apart without her. All true. All irrelevant. Ethan had made his decision 3 weeks ago when he'd realized what was happening to him. It had been a normal Thursday, Clara bringing him his afternoon coffee, and she'd laughed at something. A genuine laugh that lit up her entire face. In that moment, Ethan had felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Not since before his father had died and left him this empire to run. He'd felt happy. Not satisfied with a successful deal. Not pleased with quarterly earnings. Happy. Content. Like the world had aligned correctly for the first time in his adult life. And it had terrified him. Ethan Blake didn't do happiness. He did success. Control. Power. Emotions were weaknesses his father had beaten out of him, metaphorically through cold disapproval and impossible standards. Love was a distraction, his father had said. The minute you let someone matter, they have power over you. Ethan had watched his mother wither under that philosophy, seen her try and fail to reach his father, and eventually stop trying. He'd sworn he'd never become that. Never let someone in only to hurt them with his inability to be what they needed. So when he'd realized he was falling for Clara, actually falling for her in a way that made him want to be better, different, more human, he'd known what he had to do. End it before it started. Push her away before he destroyed her the way his father had destroyed his mother. It's better this way, he said aloud to his empty penthouse, trying to convince himself. She'll find someone who can give her what she deserves. Someone who knows how to love properly. But the words felt hollow, and the penthouse felt more like a prison than it ever had before. He finally looked at his phone. 17 missed calls. 8 texts. He opened one from Marcus. Whatever you're doing, stop. Fix this before it's too late. Too late. It was already too late. The minute Ethan had felt his heart skip when Clara smiled, it had been too late. This was damage control, a strategic retreat to protect them both from the inevitable disaster of him trying to be something he wasn't capable of being. Ethan downed the whiskey in one burning gulp and poured another. The next morning, Clara woke with renewed determination. She updated her resume, reached out to contacts, and by noon had 3 interview requests. Her reputation in the industry was solid, even if Ethan Blake had decided she wasn't good enough for him. She dressed in her power suit, the navy one that always made her feel confident, and headed to the first interview. The offices of Sterling Media were impressive, but lacked the cold grandeur of Blake Industries. The CEO, Richard Sterling, was charming and professional. Your work with Blake Industries is legendary, Ms. Evans. We'd be lucky to have you on our team. Thank you, Clara said smoothly, hiding the way Ethan's name still stung. I'm excited about the possibility of bringing my skills to a new environment. If you don't mind my asking, Richard leaned back in his chair, why leave Blake Industries? By all accounts, you and Ethan Blake worked exceptionally well together. Clara had prepared for this question. I felt it was time for a new challenge. 3 years in one position, no matter how fulfilling, can become limiting. Richard nodded, but his eyes suggested he didn't entirely believe her. No one left Ethan Blake voluntarily. But he didn't push, and by the end of the interview, Clara felt cautiously optimistic. She was leaving the building when she literally collided with someone. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her, and she looked up into familiar warm brown eyes. Clara. David. She stepped back, surprised. David Morrison had been in her MBA program, had asked her out several times before she'd started working for Ethan. She'd turned him down, too focused on her career. It's been years. For years, he said with a smile that had probably broken hearts. You look amazing. Are you interviewing here? They fell into easy conversation, catching up over coffee at a nearby cafe. David was heading Sterling Media's new division, recently divorced, and apparently still interested if the way he looked at her was any indication. I heard you were working for Blake, David said carefully. That must have been intense. It was, Clara admitted, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. Educational. Challenging. But it was time to move on. His loss, David said, and the sincerity in his voice made Clara's chest warm slightly. Listen, I know this is sudden, but would you like to have dinner sometime? Outside of the professional context, I mean. Clara hesitated. She wasn't ready. Her heart was still in pieces over Ethan. But maybe that was exactly why she should say yes. Ethan had made it clear she meant nothing to him. It was time to move forward. I'd like that, she said. What neither of them noticed was the black town car across the street, or the man in the back seat who'd been on his way to an acquisition meeting and had frozen when he'd seen Clara through the window. Ethan watched the cafe scene with something dark and ugly twisting in his chest. He watched Clara laugh, really laugh, at something this man said. He watched her agree to what was clearly a date. This is what you wanted, he told himself. For her to move on, find happiness with someone else. Someone who could give her the life she deserved. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two entirely different things. Ethan found himself memorizing the man's face, already planning to find out everything about him. Not because he cared, just because Clara had worked for him, and he felt responsible for her well-being. He told himself that all the way to his meeting, even as his hands clenched into fists. If this story is keeping you hooked, show some love by dropping a like. Let's see if we can hit 10,000 likes on this video. Your support means everything. The weekend passed in a blur of activity for Clara. She deep-cleaned her apartment, caught up with friends she'd neglected during her intensive years at Blake Industries, and went on that dinner date with David. He was charming, attentive, made her laugh. Everything a good date should be. But when he kissed her goodnight, a gentle press of lips that should have sparked something, Clara felt nothing but a hollow ache for someone else. "I had a wonderful time," David said, misreading her expression. "Can I see you again?" "Sure," Clara heard herself say, because what was the alternative? Pine for a man who'd thrown her away? "I'd like that." But as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she felt more alone than ever. Monday morning, Clara woke with purpose. She had a second interview at Sterling Media, and this time, she was determined to nail it. She chose her burgundy dress, the one that made her feel powerful, and headed into the city. The interview went perfectly. Richard Sterling offered her the position on the spot as his executive assistant, with a salary that exceeded what Blake Industries had paid her. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt empty. "I'll need a few days to consider," Clara said, though she knew she'd accept. What choice did she have? She left the building and made the mistake of walking past Blake Industries. She told herself it was on her way to the subway. She told herself she wasn't hoping to run into anyone she knew. She definitely told herself she wasn't looking up at the 43rd floor, wondering if Ethan was in his office. The building looked the same, imposing glass and steel, but she was no longer part of its world. She was turning away when Jessica from accounting burst through the revolving doors, nearly running into her. "Clara. Oh my God, I was just thinking about you." "Jessica, hi. You have to come back," Jessica said urgently. "Everything's falling apart." Ethan's new assistant lasted 2 days before she quit crying. "He's been impossible, even worse than usual. Meetings are being missed, files are getting lost." Marcus said he heard Ethan shouting in his office yesterday, which we all know he never does. Something small and petty in Clara's chest warmed at this news. Good. Let him see what he'd thrown away. But a larger part of her, the part that had genuinely cared about Ethan and the company, felt concerned. "He made his choice," Clara said carefully. "I'm sure he'll find someone suitable." "Suitable?" Jessica laughed without humor. "Clara, there is no one suitable. You made that office run. You made him almost human. Now he's back to being the Ice King, and honestly, I think it's worse because we all saw that he could be different." Clara's throat tightened. "I have to go, Jessica. It was good seeing you." She fled before the tears could start again, before she could do something stupid like march up to Ethan's office and demand an explanation. She had a new job offer, a potential new relationship with David, a life to build that didn't revolve around a man who'd made it clear she didn't fit in his. But that night, alone in her apartment with takeout she couldn't eat, Clara finally let herself acknowledge the truth. She'd fallen in love with Ethan Blake. Completely foolishly, hopelessly in love with a man who lived behind walls so high she'd never seen all of him. And the worst part was, she'd glimpsed what was behind those walls. The rare smiles, the vulnerability he'd shown during the scandal, the way he'd thanked her after she'd worked through the night to save a deal. Those glimpses had been real. She knew they had been. So why had he thrown her away? 3 weeks crawled by like months. Clara started her position at Sterling Media and discovered she was good at it, maybe even better than she'd been at Blake Industries, because here, she wasn't emotionally invested. Richard Sterling was a good boss, appreciative and respectful, but there was no spark, no challenge, none of the electric tension that had made working for Ethan exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. David asked her out twice more. She went both times, trying desperately to feel something other than emptiness. He was perfect on paper. Successful, kind, interested in her beyond the professional capacity. On their third date, he held her hand across the dinner table. "Clara, I like you. A lot. But I get the feeling you're not really here with me." She wanted to deny it, but he deserved better than lies. "I'm sorry, David. You're wonderful, truly. I'm just not quite ready." "It's Blake, isn't it?" David's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "Whatever happened between you two, it's still affecting you." "Nothing happened between us," Clara said automatically. Maybe that's the problem. After David left, Clara sat in her apartment, his words echoing. Maybe that's the problem. She'd spent 3 years maintaining perfect professionalism, never crossing the line, never. Acknowledging the feelings that had grown despite her best efforts to suppress them. Had Ethan known? Had he fired her because he'd seen through her careful facade? The thought was mortifying, but it would at least make sense of the senseless. Her phone rang. Marcus chin. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Clara, thank God. I need your help. Marcus, I don't work there anymore. I know. But please just listen. The Hartley merger is falling apart. The one you spent 3 months setting up. Their CEO won't deal with anyone but you. Says you're the only one who understood his concerns. Ethan's pride won't let him call you himself. But the company is about to lose a $100 million deal. Clara's mind raced. The Hartley merger had been her baby, her masterpiece. She'd spent countless hours with Jonathan Hartley, understanding his concerns about corporate culture, assuring him that Blake Industries would maintain Hartley Corp's family-oriented values. That's not my problem anymore, Marcus. Please. I'm not asking for Ethan. I'm asking for the 200 employees at Hartley Corp who'll lose their jobs if this merger doesn't happen. You know Ethan's only acquiring them to save the company. If this falls through, Hartley Corp will be bankrupt in 6 months. Damn him. Damn Marcus for knowing exactly how to get to her. Clara had met those employees, had promised them their jobs were safe. One meeting, she said finally. I'll talk to Jonathan Hartley. But I'm billing as a consultant, and I'm not setting foot in Blake Industries. Deal. The meeting's tomorrow at 10. Neutral location. Clara, thank you. She hung up and immediately wondered if she'd made a mistake. Seeing Ethan again, even in a professional capacity, felt dangerous. But she'd made a promise to those Hartley employees, and unlike some people, she kept her promises. The conference room at the Mandarin Oriental was elegant and neutral, perfect for tense negotiations. Clara arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in her most professional armor. A black suit with a crisp white blouse, hair pulled back severely, minimal makeup. She looked competent and unapproachable, which was exactly the image she wanted to project. She wasn't prepared for the way her heart stopped when Ethan walked in. He looked terrible. That was her first thought. Still impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But there were shadows under his eyes, new lines around his mouth. He'd lost weight. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Good, that petty part of her thought. But the larger part wanted to go to him, smooth those lines away, ask what was wrong. Their eyes met across the room, and something electric passed between them. Ethan stopped mid-stride, his expression unreadable, but his body language screaming tension. Clara. Her name came out rough, like he'd been holding it in for weeks. Mr. Blake. She kept her voice cool, professional. I'm here as a consultant for the Hartley merger. Let's keep this strictly business. Something flickered in his eyes, hurt maybe, but it was gone before she could identify it. Of course. Thank you for coming. They sat on opposite sides of the conference table, Marcus between them like a referee. The next hour was excruciating. They reviewed the merger terms, discussed Jonathan Hartley's concerns, and created a strategy to salvage the deal. Clara was brilliant, Ethan had to admit, watching her work. She understood the human element of business in a way he never had, could navigate emotional concerns while maintaining the bottom line. It was one of the things he'd loved about her. Loved. Not past tense. Present. Agonizing present. Jonathan needs assurance that his company culture will be preserved, Clara was saying. He built Hartley Corp from nothing. It's not just business to him, it's legacy. We can't guarantee no changes, Ethan said, his first contribution in 20 minutes. Some restructuring is necessary for efficiency. Then the deal dies and 200 people lose their jobs before Christmas. Clara's eyes flashed. Is efficiency worth that? Is sentimentality worth compromising the entire acquisition? Ethan shot back, feeling himself slip into old patterns of argument with her, the kind they'd had dozens of times when she'd pushed him to consider the human cost of his decisions. It's not sentimentality, it's strategy. Happy employees are productive employees. Respected employees don't flee to competitors with proprietary information. But you've never cared about that, have you? People are just numbers on spreadsheets to you. The words landed like a slap. Ethan stood abruptly, and Clara stood with him, two opponents across a battlefield of financial documents. I care, Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. I care more than you know. You have a hell of a way of showing it, Clara said, and suddenly they weren't talking about the merger anymore. The tension in the room was suffocating. Marcus cleared his throat. I'll give you two a moment. Call Jonathan and see if we can schedule a follow-up. He fled the room with suspicious speed. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Ethan moved to the window, putting distance between them before he did something stupid like pull her into his arms and never let go. "How have you been?" he asked, his back to her, unable to look at her without breaking. "Don't." Clara's voice shook slightly. "Don't pretend you care now. You made your decision, Ethan. You don't get to ask how I am. I fired you." The words came out flat. "I didn't stop caring." Clara laughed, a bitter sound. "Funny way of showing it. 3 years, Ethan. 3 years of my life I gave to you, to that company. And you threw me away without explanation, without even the courtesy of a real reason." He turned to face her then, and the raw pain in his eyes shocked her into silence. "You think that was easy for me? You think I wanted to do that? Then why did you?" The question hung between them, sharp and demanding. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. How could he explain without sounding insane? That he'd fired her because he was falling in love with her? That he'd pushed her away to protect her from his inevitable failure at being what she needed? "It doesn't matter," he said finally, and watched her face close off. "You're right," Clara said coldly, gathering her papers. "It doesn't matter. I'll send you my recommendations for the Hartley merger by email. My consulting fee can be sent to the address Marcus has. Goodbye, Mr. Blake." She walked out, and Ethan let her go, even though every instinct screamed at him to follow. He slumped into a chair and dropped his head into his hands. He was making a mess of this, of everything. But what choice did he have? He couldn't saddle Clara with the disaster of a relationship with him. He'd seen what happened when men like him, men raised in ice and discipline, tried to love. His father had destroyed his mother's spirit. Ethan refused to do the same to Clara. But God, watching her walk away again was killing him. Comment below if you think Ethan should fight for Clara or let her go. I want to hear your thoughts. 2 days later, Clara was working late at Sterling Media when her phone rang. Unknown number, but something made her answer. "Ms. Evans? This is Jonathan Hartley. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Mr. Hartley, not at all. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you personally for your work on our merger. Marcus Chin sent me your recommendations, and I'm impressed. You clearly understand what Hartley Corp means beyond the balance sheet." "Thank you, sir. Your employees deserve protection during this transition." "Indeed." Jonathan paused. "Ms. Evans, I have a proposition for you. How would you like to be the liaison between Hartley Corp and Blake Industries during the merger transition? 6-month contract, generous compensation, and you'd be working primarily from our offices, not Blake's." Clara's mind raced. It would mean seeing Ethan occasionally, but not working for him directly. It would also mean ensuring the merger she'd worked so hard on succeeded. "I'm currently employed at Sterling Media. I've already spoken with Richard Sterling. He's agreed to give you a leave of absence if you're interested. Ms. Evans, I trust you. That's not something I say lightly. Will you consider it?" She should say no. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at her to say no. But the professional part of her, the part that took pride in her work, couldn't walk away from seeing this through. "I'll do it," she said before she could change her mind. The next 6 weeks were a strange kind of torture. Clara worked primarily from Hartley Corp's offices in Connecticut, but weekly meetings at Blake Industries were unavoidable. Each time she entered that building, each time she saw Ethan across a conference table, it hurt. But she was professional, brilliant, untouchable. Ethan watched her from a distance, seeing her thrive in a way she maybe never had under his employ. She laughed with the Hartley employees, remembered birthdays, created a culture of appreciation that was transforming the acquisition into something more than a business transaction. She was magnificent, and he'd lost her. Marcus noticed, of course. He cornered Ethan in his office after one particularly tense meeting where Ethan and Clara had disagreed on severance packages. "You're an idiot," Marcus said bluntly. "Excuse me? You heard me. You're in love with her, she was clearly in love with you, and instead of doing something about it like a normal human being, you fired her. Are you trying to win an award for world's biggest fool?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, you had something real with Clara, something that made you almost human, and you destroyed it." "Why?" "Because I'm my father's son," Ethan said quietly. "Because men like me don't know how to love properly. We destroy what we touch. I saw it growing up, Marcus. My father reduced my mother to a shadow. I refused to do that to Clara." Marcus stared at him. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You're not your father, Ethan. The fact that you're worried about hurting Clara proves that. Your father never worried about anyone but himself. You don't know. I know that woman has been miserable for 2 months. I know you've been worse. I know that life is short and real connections are rare, and you're both throwing away something beautiful because you're scared. Marcus stood. Get your head out of your ass, Blake. Before it's really too late. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood in his penthouse, Marcus's words echoing. Was he being noble or just cowardly? Was protecting Clara from himself really protection? Or just an excuse to avoid the terrifying vulnerability of admitting he needed someone? He thought of his mother, remembering more than he usually let himself. She'd been a vibrant woman in old photos, full of life. But his father had slowly drained that life away with criticism, distance, impossible standards. Ethan had sworn never to become that. But had his father ever loved his mother? Had he ever worried about her happiness? Or had he simply been incapable of caring about anyone else's needs? Ethan thought about Clara, really thought about her. The way she'd fought him on ethical issues, never letting him take the easy path when it hurt people. The way she'd organized his life but also pushed back when he was wrong. She wasn't weak. She'd never let anyone, including him, diminish her. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe Ethan wasn't his father. Maybe the fact that he was terrified of hurting Clara meant he wouldn't. But what if he'd already hurt her too badly? What if she'd moved on? The thought of Clara with someone else, the image of her laughing with that man in the coffee shop, made Ethan's chest tighten painfully. He'd pushed her away to protect her. But what if all he'd done was push her toward someone else? His phone buzzed. A text from his mother, rare enough to be notable. Saw Clara at the charity gala tonight with a handsome man. She looked happy. I miss seeing her at our brunches. Whatever you did, fix it. Ethan stared at the message. Clara at a gala. With someone. Happy. He should be glad. That's what he'd wanted, right? For her to move on, find happiness? But the jealousy that roared through him suggested otherwise. And maybe, for the first time in months, Ethan let himself acknowledge the truth. He didn't want to protect Clara from himself. He wanted to fight for her, to be the man she deserved, to try even if he failed. He just didn't know if she'd give him the chance. The annual Children's Hope Charity Gala was the social event of the season, drawing Manhattan's elite to support pediatric hospitals. Clara had accepted David's invitation before she could think better of it, and now she stood in a ballroom that glittered with crystal and candlelight, feeling like a fraud in her borrowed evening gown. David was attentive and charming, introducing her to important people, making her laugh. But her eyes kept scanning the room, and she hated herself for it. She was looking for Ethan, even though he never attended these events, hated the social schmoozing they required. Which is why her breath caught when she saw him enter. Ethan Blake in a tuxedo should be illegal. He moved through the crowd with his usual confidence, but his eyes were scanning, searching, until they landed on her. Even across the crowded ballroom, she felt the impact of that gaze. Everything else faded away, the music, the chatter, David's voice beside her. Ethan started walking toward her, and Clara's heart hammered. No, she wasn't ready. She just started to feel like she could breathe again. Clara, you okay? David asked, following her gaze. Oh, that's Blake. Yes, Clara said, forcing herself to look away. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. Ethan was cutting through the crowd with purpose, his jaw set, his eyes never leaving hers. People tried to stop him, greet him, but he brushed past them all. When he reached their small group, he ignored David entirely, his attention fixed solely on Clara. We need to talk, Ethan said, his voice rough. I'm here with someone, Clara replied, proud of how steady she sounded despite her racing heart. I know. I apologize for the interruption. Ethan finally looked at David, some silent male communication passing between them. May I steal her for 5 minutes? David looked at Clara, reading something in her expression that made him sigh. Take your time, he said gently, squeezing her hand before walking away. Ethan led her through the ballroom to a balcony overlooking the city. The November air was crisp, and Clara shivered in her sleeveless gown. Immediately, Ethan shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the gesture so automatic it made her chest ache. What do you want, Ethan? She pulled the jacket tighter, hating how good it felt to be wrapped in his warmth, his scent. He gripped the balcony railing, knuckles white. I owe you an explanation. Several explanations. And an apology that could never be adequate. Now, after 2 months, you decide now is the time. I saw you with him. David Morrison. Ethan's voice was tight. I saw you looking happy, and I realized I have no right to want what I want. But I'm going to ask anyway because the alternative is spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Clara's breath caught. What are you saying? Ethan turned to face her fully, and the vulnerability in his eyes was devastating. I fired you because I was falling in love with you. Because I'd already fallen, and it terrified me more than any business deal or hostile takeover ever had. The words hung between them, impossible and real. Clara's mind reeled. That's insane. People don't fire someone they love. I do. Ethan's laugh was bitter. I do exactly that because I'm an idiot who thought pushing you away was protecting you. My father destroyed my mother with his inability to love properly. I watched her fade year after year, trying to reach a man who didn't know how to let anyone in. I swore I'd never do that to someone I cared about. So you hurt me instead? Clara's voice shook with anger and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. You think that was protection? I know it wasn't. I know I was a coward hiding behind noble intentions. Ethan stepped closer, close enough that Clara could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the desperation in his expression. I watched you leave, and every day since has been torture. I told myself you were better off, that you'd find someone who could give you what you deserved. Then I saw you with Morrison and Clara. I've never been a jealous man, but the thought of anyone else making you smile made me want to burn the world down. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink back. You don't get to do this, Ethan. You don't get to break my heart and then waltz back in because you're jealous. I spent 3 years hiding how I felt, maintaining professionalism, never crossing the line. And all that time, you knew? You felt the same way and said nothing. I said nothing because I was afraid, Ethan admitted, his voice breaking slightly. Afraid that I'd ruin you the way my father ruined my mother. Afraid that I don't know how to be what you need. I've spent my whole life being cold, calculated, controlled. The Ice King. How could someone like me ever make someone like you happy? Someone like me? Clara whispered. Warm. Kind. Capable of turning a corporate nightmare into a family. Ethan's hand lifted, hesitated, then gently cupped her face. You made me feel human again, Clara. You made me want to be better, softer, more than just the machine my father created. That terrified me because I didn't know if I could be those things, and I couldn't bear to disappoint you. A tear escaped down Clara's cheek, and Ethan caught it with his thumb. You already disappointed me, she said, but her voice was soft now, not angry. You threw me away like I meant nothing when I'd given you everything. How do I trust that you won't do it again the next time you get scared? You can't, Ethan said honestly. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, or that I'll always know the right thing to say. I'm learning how to do this, Clara. How to let someone in, how to be vulnerable, how to love without destroying. But I can promise that I will try every single day. I can promise that you've already changed me in ways I didn't think possible. And I can promise that firing you was the biggest mistake of my life, and I will spend however long you'll let me making it up to you. Clara closed her eyes, torn between wanting to fall into his arms and wanting to protect herself from being hurt again. I have a date inside. A good man who's interested in me, who won't push me away. I know. And if you want him, if he makes you happy, I'll walk away right now. I'll never bother you again. Ethan's hand dropped from her face, even though it clearly cost him. But if there's any chance, any possibility that you might feel even a fraction of what I feel for you, then I'm asking you to give me that chance. Let me prove I can be the man you deserve. And if you can't, Clara opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. What happens when being with me gets hard or scary and your instinct is to push me away again? Then you call me on it, Ethan said fiercely. You fight with me, you push back, you don't let me retreat into old patterns. That's one of the things I love about you, Clara. You never let me get away with anything. You made me better at work by challenging me, by refusing to let me take the easy path when it hurt people. Do the same thing in this. Don't let me hide. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. 3 years of hidden feelings, 2 months of heartbreak, and now this. Ethan Blake, the Ice King himself, standing on a balcony and baring his soul. Begging for a chance she'd dreamed of, but never thought she'd have. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. You hurt me so badly, Ethan. I know. He took her hands, his grip gentle but firm. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Clara, I love you. I'm in love with you. Not the professional version you showed at work, but all of you. The way you sing off-key when you think no one's listening. The way you organize everything by color. The way you defend people who can't defend themselves. The way you made me want to be human again instead of just successful. You love me, Clara repeated, testing the words, trying to believe them. So much it scares me breathless, Ethan admitted. I don't know how to do this, but I want to learn. With you. If you'll have me. Clara looked at him, really looked at him. At the vulnerability in his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly holding hers, the rawness of his expression. This wasn't the Ice King. This was just Ethan, flawed and scared and trying. I have to go tell David, she said finally. Hope and despair warred on Ethan's face. Of course. I understand. No, you don't. Clara squeezed his hands. I have to tell him that I can't see him anymore, because my heart belongs to an idiot who fired me 2 months ago and just now figured out how to use his words. It took a moment for her words to register. When they did, Ethan's expression transformed, hope blooming into something bright and beautiful. Clara, I'm not saying this will be easy, she interrupted. I'm not saying I'm not still hurt or that you're forgiven just because you made a pretty speech. You broke my heart, Ethan Blake. That doesn't just go away. I know. I'll spend every day earning your trust back. I swear it. And the minute you feel yourself retreating, the minute you start thinking you need to protect me by pushing me away, you tell me. We talk about it. No more running. No more firing me to avoid your feelings. No more running, Ethan agreed, pulling her closer. Clara, may I kiss you? She should make him wait. Should make him work harder, prove himself more. But she'd waited 3 years already, and the way he was looking at her, like she was the most precious thing in his world, made all her defenses crumble. Yes, she whispered. Ethan kissed her like a man who'd been dying of thirst and finally found water. Gentle at first, almost reverent, then deeper as Clara's arms wrapped around his neck, and she kissed him back with 3 years of suppressed longing. The city sparkled around them, but neither noticed. The world had narrowed to this moment, this kiss, this beginning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said again, like he needed to make sure she believed it. I love you too, Clara admitted, the words she'd hidden for so long finally free. I've loved you for years, you impossible man. Then I'm the luckiest idiot alive. Ethan pulled back slightly, his thumb tracing her cheek. Come home with me tonight. Not for anything except talking. I want to tell you everything I should have said years ago. Clara smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. I need to talk to David first. He deserves an honest explanation. He's a good man for letting you go. He is. But he's not you. They walked back inside together, and Clara found David at the bar. He took one look at her face and smiled sadly. I'm guessing I just lost my date for the evening. I'm so sorry, David. You've been wonderful, truly. But my heart is somewhere else. I know. I've known since the first date, honestly. David glanced at Ethan, who stood a respectful distance away. He hurt you. He did. Is he going to do it again? Clara looked back at Ethan, saw him watching her with an expression that made her chest warm. I don't think so. And if he tries, I'll make sure he regrets it. David laughed. I believe you will. Be happy, Clara. You deserve it. She hugged him, grateful for his grace, then walked back to Ethan. Ready? She asked. For whatever comes next with you. Absolutely. They left the gala together, and Manhattan sparkled around them like a promise. In the car, Ethan held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm like he needed the constant contact to believe she was real. Tell me everything, Clara said softly. Start from the beginning. So he did. He told her about his father, about the cold upbringing that had taught him emotions were weaknesses. He told her about watching his mother fade, about swearing he'd never inflict that pain on someone he loved. He told her about the exact moment he'd realized he was falling for her, that Thursday when her laugh had hit him like lightning. I panicked, Ethan admitted as they rode the elevator up to his penthouse. I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself. The idea of letting you in completely, of being vulnerable, terrified me more than any business risk ever had. You know that's not how love works, right? Clara said as they entered his apartment. You can't protect someone from yourself by hurting them. That's just a different kind of pain. I know that now. Ethan led her to the massive windows overlooking the city. I know a lot of things now that I should have realized 2 months ago. Like the fact that you're the strongest person I know, and the idea that I could break you is insulting to how incredible you are. Clara laughed despite herself. So you fired me because you underestimated me? I fired you because I overestimated my ability to live without you. Ethan turned her to face him. These 2 months have been hell, Clara. Every morning I expected to see you at your desk. Every decision I made, I wanted your input. The office felt dead without you. I felt dead without you. Good. Clara said, but she was smiling. You should have felt terrible. I did. I know. Jessica told me you cried when you packed your things. That image has haunted me. Ethan's voice roughened. I'm so sorry, Clara. For all of it. For hurting you, for not being brave enough to admit my feelings sooner, for wasting time we could have spent together. We have time now, Clara said, her hand finding his. If we choose to use it wisely. I want to, Ethan said intensely. I want all of it, Clara. The fights and the laughter and the quiet moments. I want you challenging me when I'm wrong and celebrating with me when things go right. I want to learn how to be the partner you deserve. You're already starting, Clara assured him. The fact that you're talking about this, admitting your fears instead of hiding behind cold professionalism, that's huge, Ethan. They talked through the night, curled together on his couch as the city lights blazed below them. Ethan told her about his childhood, the pressure to be perfect, the impossible standards. Clara told him about her own fears, about falling for her boss and knowing it was professional suicide, about the heartbreak of being dismissed without explanation. I thought I wasn't good enough, she admitted as the sky began to lighten with dawn. I thought I'd failed you somehow, that all my work for 3 years hadn't mattered. You've never failed at anything, Ethan said fiercely, pulling her closer. You were perfect. That was the problem. You were so perfect that I couldn't imagine you'd ever want someone as damaged as me. You're not damaged, Clara argued. You're cautious, you're guarded, you've been hurt. But Ethan, that doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, pouring years of longing into the contact. When they broke apart, the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Stay, Ethan whispered. Not just today. Stay in my life, Clara. Be with me. Let me prove that I can do this, that we can do this. I'll stay, Clara said, and felt the rightness of the decision settle into her bones. But Ethan, I need you to promise me something. Anything. The next time you're scared, the next time you feel yourself wanting to retreat, you come to me. We talk about it. No more running. No more pushing me away to protect me from feelings I'm perfectly capable of handling. I promise. Ethan sealed it with another kiss. No more running. We face everything together. If you're loving this journey, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our stories. Trust me, you'll want to see what comes next. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Ethan had to learn how to be in a relationship, how to share his space and his life, how to be vulnerable without feeling like he was losing control. Clara had to learn to trust him again, to believe that he wouldn't bolt the moment things got difficult. They had their first real fight 3 weeks in. Clara wanted to introduce Ethan to her family over Thanksgiving, and Ethan panicked at the idea of that level of intimacy, of being judged by people who mattered to her. This is exactly what we talked about, Clara said, frustrated. You're retreating. I'm not. Ethan stopped, recognizing the pattern. He took a breath, forced himself to be honest. You're right. I'm scared. What if they hate me? What if they think I'm not good enough for you? Because, Clara, I'm not sure I am. That's not for you to decide, Clara said, her voice gentler. I chose you, Ethan. My family will love you because I love you. But you have to let them in. You have to stop hiding behind walls. It was hard. The Thanksgiving dinner with Clara's warm, chaotic family was one of the most terrifying experiences of Ethan's life. But Clara held his hand under the table, and her mother fussed over him, and her father asked about his work with genuine interest. By the end of the evening, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since before his own father died: acceptance. See, Clara said on the drive home, her head on his shoulder. Not so terrible. Terrifying, Ethan corrected. But good. Thank you for pushing me. That's my job now, Clara teased. Professional Ethan Blake humanity coach. He laughed, the sound coming easier these days. What's the pay? Extensive. Includes unlimited kisses and access to your excellent coffee maker. Deal. December arrived with the first snow, and Ethan found himself doing things he'd never imagined. Ice skating in Central Park, where Clara laughed at his attempts to stay upright. Shopping for Christmas presents, where he discovered the joy of finding the perfect gift just to see her smile. Hosting a holiday party at his penthouse, where Clara filled his cold space with warmth and laughter and life. Marcus pulled him aside at the party, grinning. You know you smile now, right? Like actual genuine smiles. It's disturbing and wonderful. Clara's influence, Ethan admitted, watching her across the room as she chatted with guests. She's good for you. Don't screw it up again. Not planning on it. But the real test came in January, when a business deal went catastrophically wrong. Ethan lost a major account due to a competitor's underhanded tactics, and his first instinct was to retreat, to handle it alone, to push everyone away, including Clara. He caught himself before he could. Instead, he called her at 2 a.m. from his office, where he'd been rage-working for hours. "I need you," he said when she answered, voice rough. "I'm at the office and I'm spiraling and I need you." Clara arrived 30 minutes later in sweatpants and one of his old shirts, her hair a mess, her face soft with sleep and concern. She didn't say anything, just pulled him into a hug that he collapsed into like a drowning man finding shore. "Talk to me," she said softly. So he did. He told her about the lost deal, about feeling like a failure, about the voice in his head that sounded like his father saying he wasn't good enough. Clara listened, then made him tea, then helped him strategize next steps. By dawn, they had a plan, and more importantly, Ethan had remembered that he didn't have to face everything alone anymore. "Thank you," he said as they watched the sunrise from his office window. "For coming. For not letting me push you away. You called me instead of hiding," Clara pointed out. "That's growth, Ethan. I'm proud of you." Those simple words did something to him. When had anyone ever said they were proud of him? His father had demanded excellence but never acknowledged achievement. His mother had been too broken to offer support. But Clara saw him, really saw him, and loved him anyway. "Marry me," Ethan said suddenly. Clara turned to him, eyes wide. "What? I know it's fast. I know we've only been officially together for 2 months. But Clara, I've loved you for years, and I don't want to waste any more time. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to face every challenge with you by my side. I want the world to know that you chose me, that you made me better, that you're mine and I'm yours." He took her hands, his heart pounding. "I don't have a ring yet. I wanted to pick one out with you. But I'm asking anyway, because I'm learning that perfect timing doesn't exist, and sometimes you just have to be brave enough to reach for what you want." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "That's the most romantic and impulsive thing I've ever heard from you. Is that a yes? That's a ask me again when you have a ring and haven't been up all night stress working," Clara said, but she was laughing. "Ethan, I love you. But I want you to ask me when you're sure it's not just fear of lost talking. When you're asking because you're ready, not because you're scared." Ethan nodded, understanding even through his disappointment. "You're right. But Clara, I am ready. And I will ask again properly when you're ready to hear it." "I'll be listening," Clara promised, kissing him softly. True to his word, Ethan waited. He took Clara ring shopping, let her point out what she liked, and worked with a jeweler to create something unique and perfect. He planned something he was good at, but this time the plan was about romance instead of business. 3 months later, on a warm April evening, Ethan arranged a private dinner on the rooftop of Blake Industries. The same building where Clara had worked, where their story had really begun. He'd transformed the space with lights and flowers, a table set for 2, and a view of the city that had witnessed their journey. Clara's breath caught when the elevator doors opened, and she saw what he'd created. "Ethan, I fired you from this building," Ethan said, taking her hand and leading her to the table. "I broke your heart in my office 43 floors below us. So I wanted to reclaim this place, turn it into something beautiful instead of painful." They had dinner, talking and laughing the way they'd learned to do, comfortable in a way Ethan had never thought possible. When the meal was finished and the city sparkled around them, Ethan stood and held out his hand. "Come here." Clara let him lead her to the edge of the rooftop, where they could see all of Manhattan spread before them. Ethan turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. 5 months ago, I stood on a balcony and told you I loved you for the first time. I was terrified and desperate, and sure I'd already lost you. Tonight, I'm still terrified, but for different reasons." Clara smiled, her hands finding his. "Why are you scared?" "Because this matters more than any business deal or acquisition ever could. Because you've become the center of my world, and the thought of you saying no is." He took a breath. "But I'm asking anyway because you taught me that being brave means facing fear, not avoiding it." He dropped to one knee, and Clara's hands flew to her mouth as tears immediately sprang to her eyes. "Clara Evans, you walked into my life 3 years ago and slowly, patiently, impossibly, you taught me how to be human again. You showed me that love isn't weakness but strength. That vulnerability isn't failure but courage. You fought with me and challenged me and refused to let me hide behind walls. You made me want to be better, softer, more. And then, when I was stupid enough to push you away, You were brave enough to give me a second chance." Ethan pulled out the ring, a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the city lights and threw them back like captured stars. "I know I don't deserve you. I know I'll probably make mistakes and sometimes retreat into old patterns. But I promise to keep trying, to keep growing, to keep being the man you make me want to be. I promise to face my fears instead of running from them. I promise to love you with everything I have for as long as you'll let me." He looked up at her, this woman who had transformed his life, and felt his voice shake with emotion. "Will you marry me, Clara? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you're the best decision I ever made?" Clara was crying openly now, but she was smiling too, radiant and beautiful in his. "Yes," she said, then louder. "Yes. Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like tears and laughter and promise. Around them, the city celebrated with lights and distant sounds of life, but all Ethan could focus on was the woman in his arms, the one who'd saved him from himself. When they finally broke apart, Clara laughed breathlessly. "You know, when you fired me, I never imagined it would lead to this." "Worst decision that led to the best outcome," Ethan agreed, his forehead pressed to hers. "Though I don't recommend my methods. Therapy would have been faster." "We're doing therapy," Clara informed him. "Couples counseling. Because I love you, but I want us to have all the tools we need to build something lasting." "Whatever you want," Ethan promised. "Therapy, compromise, communication, all of it. I'm all in, Clara. No more running, no more hiding. Just us facing everything together." "Together," Clara echoed and kissed him again. They stayed on the rooftop for hours, talking about the future, about wedding plans and dreams and the life they'd build. Ethan told her he wanted to step back from some of his CEO duties, to make time for what really mattered. Clara told him about her ideas for expanding their charitable foundation, about making a real difference beyond profit margins. "I never thought I could have this," Ethan admitted as they slow danced to music only they could hear. "A partner, a future that didn't revolve around work. You gave me that, Clara. You gave me everything." "You gave yourself that," Clara corrected gently. "I just showed you what was already there. The capacity to love, to change, to grow. That was all you, Ethan. I'm just lucky enough to witness it." Before we wrap up this beautiful story, leave a comment and tell me, what was your favorite moment? And don't forget to like this video if you believe in second chances and true love. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony that would have made Ethan's society-conscious father turn in his grave. Just close friends and family, Clara's warm chaos meeting Ethan's corporate colleagues, and somehow it worked. Marcus was the best man, giving a speech about watching Ethan transform from the Ice King into someone who actually smiled. Clara's sister was the maid of honor, tearfully recounting how Clara had cried over Ethan for months before he pulled his head out of his ass. Ethan's mother, surprisingly emotional, told Clara at the reception, "You've given me my son back. The one I thought I'd lost when his father died. Thank you." But the best moment came at the end of the night when Ethan and Clara finally escaped to the car waiting to take them to the airport. As they drove away from the venue, Clara's head on Ethan's shoulder, his hand playing with her wedding ring, Ethan felt a peace he'd never known. "Happy?" Clara asked softly. "Deliriously," Ethan admitted. "Terrifyingly so. Sometimes I still can't believe you chose me." "Every day," Clara promised. "I choose you every day, Ethan Blake. On the good days and the challenging ones. When you're being impossible and when you're being wonderful. That's what marriage is, right? Choosing each other, every single day." "Then I choose you too," Ethan said, kissing her temple. "Every day for the rest of our lives." 3 years later, Clara walked into Blake Industries for the first time since Ethan had fired her that devastating September afternoon. But everything was different now. She was Mrs. Blake, co-running their expanded charitable foundation that had helped thousands of families. The building still gleamed with corporate success, but there was warmth too now. Employee programs Clara had helped design, work-life balance initiatives, a culture of respect and appreciation. The elevator ride to the 43rd floor felt like coming home. When the doors opened, Ethan was waiting, leaning against what used to be her desk, and was now occupied by a cheerful young man who absolutely did not make Ethan feel remotely what Clara had. "Mrs. Blake," Ethan said with a smile that still made her heart skip. "You're late." "Traffic was terrible," Clara replied, walking into his arms like she'd done 1,000 times. "Also, your daughter was fussy this morning and didn't want to go to daycare." "Our daughter," Ethan corrected, his hand finding Clara's still flat stomach where their second child was growing. And she clearly gets her stubborn streak from you. Please. She's all you. Those determined little eyebrows are pure Blake genetics. They'd had their daughter, Emma, a year ago, and watching Ethan become a father had been its own revelation. He was patient and gentle, determined to be everything his own father hadn't been. He read parenting books with the same intensity he'd once read quarterly reports. He wasn't perfect, still struggled sometimes with expressing emotions, but he tried. Every single day he tried. And that, Clara had learned, was enough. Not perfection, but effort. Not cold success, but warm humanity. Ready for the board meeting? Clara asked, straightening his tie even though it was already perfect. Some habits died hard. With you by my side? Always. Ethan kissed her softly. Thank you, by the way. For what? For giving me a second chance. For teaching me that love isn't weakness but the greatest strength I've ever known. For choosing me even when I gave you every reason not to. Clara smiled, remembering that cold September day when her world had ended, not knowing it was actually about to begin. You know what I realized? She said softly. You didn't fire me to push me away. You fired me to find me. The real me. Not the professional assistant, but the woman you could actually love without the complications of being your employee. That's a very generous interpretation, Ethan said with a slight smile. I like to think I fired you because I was an idiot. That too, Clara agreed, laughing. But an idiot who learned, who grew, who became the man I always knew was hiding under all that ice. Not hiding anymore, Ethan promised, pulling her close. You melted it all away, Clara. You showed me that vulnerability isn't death, it's life. That love isn't the end of control, it's the beginning of something better. They stood there in his office, wrapped in each other, the city stretching beyond the windows that had witnessed both their ending and their beginning. The same office where he'd said the words that had broken her heart now held only love and promise, and the future they'd built together. Come on, Clara said finally, taking his hand. Let's go change the world. Together. Together, Ethan echoed, and they walked into the boardroom side by side. Years from now, people would tell the story of Ethan Blake and Clara Evans. The Ice King who'd learned to love. The assistant who'd taught him humanity. They'd talk about the firing that had shocked the corporate world, the reconciliation that had given everyone hope, the love story that had transformed not just two people, but an entire company culture. But the best part of the story, the part that mattered most, wasn't in the headlines or corporate legends. It was in the quiet moments. Ethan reading bedtime stories to Emma with more emotion than he'd ever shown in a boardroom. Clara stealing kisses in the elevator between meetings. The two of them dancing in their kitchen at midnight, swaying to silence, content in the life they'd chosen. It was in Ethan waking up every morning and still feeling surprised by his own happiness. It was in Clara watching him play with their daughter and knowing she'd been right to take that risk, to give him that second chance. Love, they'd learned, wasn't about perfection. It was about two imperfect people choosing each other, every single day. It was about growth and forgiveness, and the courage to be vulnerable even when it terrified you. Ethan had fired Clara to protect his heart, not realizing that the only way to truly protect it was to give it away. And Clara had accepted his proposal not because he was perfect, but because he was willing to try. In the end, that's what mattered. Not the firing or the reconciliation or even the dramatic proposal under city lights. What mattered was the choice made daily to love and be loved despite fear and imperfection and all the ways people can hurt each other. What mattered was that they'd found each other, lost each other, and fought their way back. That they'd turned pain into growth and mistakes into lessons and a cold ending into the warmest beginning. And as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of golden fire, Ethan Blake held his wife's hand and knew that he was the luckiest man alive. Not because of his wealth or success or corporate empire, but because Clara had looked at all his broken pieces and said, I love you anyway. And really, what more could anyone ask for than that? Thank you so much for staying until the end of this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Drop a comment below telling us what you think, what other stories you'd like to hear. Remember, love isn't perfect, but it's always worth fighting for. Until next time, this is Hearts and Crowns, reminding you that every ending can be a new beginning.